Welcome to Unit 14 in the lab manual for Anatomy and Physiology 2 students. In this chapter, we're going to be talking about the peripheral nervous system, with specific emphasis on the cranial nerves, and some discussion of the autonomic nervous system. Now, for the cranial nerves, we have to keep in mind that these are the special set of 12 nerves that exit out from the base of the brain, and these nerves are very different and, like I said, special relative to the regular spinal nerves exiting out from the spinal cord, because these nerves not only provide a more complex array of functions for the face, the head and neck anatomy, and some of the other areas as well in the body, and also they often are associated with carrying multiple different pathways through each nerve. So in order to understand what each of these nerves do, we're going to categorize them according to what kind of nerve it is. Is it a pure sensory? Is it a pure motor? Is it a mixed nerve? Does the nerve have any other special modalities? And also we want to know basically what is the number associated with the nerve. Each of these are CM numbers with the Roman numerals, and obviously the name of the nerve. What I'm not going to be discussing here is where exactly does the nerve exit out. At the base of the brain, you can see these pictures, illustrations in the lab manual and other sources. So primarily we want to know the name of the nerve, the number associated with the cranial nerve, whether this is a sensory, motor, or other kind of nerve, and obviously what it's doing. Now, again, there are 12 cranial nerves. Primary function of the cranial nerves involves the facial and head and neck anatomy areas, and so supplying the muscles, the bones, the other organs and features inside the head, such as, for instance, the oral cavity or the eyes, ears, and so on. All right, so our first cranial nerve 1, is also called the olfactory nerve. Olfactory or olfaction is for the sense of smell. This is a pure sensory nerve dealing with the sense of smell only. So obviously the receptors for these nerves wind up inside the nasal cavity, where they pick up on different odors that are entering the system. The next nerve is the cranial nerve 2. That's the optic nerve. This is the nerve connects to the back of the eyeball. The optic nerve carries the sensory information for vision, for eyesight, all the way back to the occipital lobes. Keep in mind, that's the primary visual cortex in the brain. So again, it's a pure sensory nerve that provides sense of vision. This is the optic nerve, cranial nerve 2. The next nerve is the cranial nerve 3. This is the oculomotor nerve. There are 3 separate cranial nerves that innervate the extraocular muscles to move the eyeballs. Remember, the extraocular muscles are the superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial rectus, lateral rectus, superior oblique, and the inferior oblique. There are 6 extraocular muscles that move the eyes in different directions when you're trying to kind of look in different areas, up or down, left to the right, things like that. Now, the first of these 3 nerves is the oculomotor nerve. The oculomotor nerve is a fairly complex nerve. It has actually somatic and autonomic motor function. Somatic means these are regular innervations for body parts, and autonomic means this is the involuntary innervation. So, this nerve actually opens the eyelids, constricts the pupil, and most importantly, again for us, is that it provides innervations to 4 of the 6 extraocular muscles. Now, which muscles is providing innervation for? Basically, these are medial rectus, superior rectus, inferior oblique. Right? So superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial rectus, and inferior oblique, 4 extraocular muscles. The other 2 muscles will be innervated by other cranial nerves like the abducens and the trochlear nerve that we're going to get to soon. Now again, keep in mind, we're talking about the 3rd cranial nerve here, the oculomotor nerve. It opens the eyelids, constricts the pupil, and provides the innervation to the 4 extraocular muscles. The 4th cranial nerve, the trochlear nerve, very simple, very small nerve, much smaller in size and much less complex than the oculomotor previously. This is a pure motor nerve, meaning it only goes to the muscles for movement. and it actually innervates just the superior oblique muscle. Superior oblique muscle, when you constrict that muscle, you're basically looking down and out or down and laterally with your eyes. Okay. The next nerve, cranial nerve 5, is the trigeminal nerve. This is one of the largest nerves of all the cranial nerves here. Trigeminal indicated has 3 components here. One that goes to the superior, middle, and kind of inferior portions of the face. Basically, this is a mixed nerve, meaning it carries multiple different modalities. And primarily has 2 main functions for us here. It provides the sensation to the face, like when you're touching your face and you're feeling your fingers on your face, whether it's pressure or light touch or that kind of sensation. This is thanks to the trigeminal nerve. You're being able to sense that on your skin. And also the muscles for chewing, muscles of mastication like the temporalis and other muscles for chewing are innervated by the trigeminal nerve. The next nerve is the cranial nerve 6, that's the abducens nerve. Abducens from the word abduction. Basically, this nerve is a pure motor nerve that innervates the lateral rectus muscle. Lateral rectus is the muscle that's kind of on the side of the head, next on the connected to the eyeball. So, for instance, if you're using the lateral rectus muscle, then your eyes move in the kind of lateral direction, right, to the side. So, like the right eye, lateral rectus contracts, you look to the right. If the lateral rectus contracts in the left eye, you look to the left. Again, abducens nerve, right? Keep in mind, right? So we have the oculomotor, trochlear, now abducens. These 3 cranial nerves supply the innervation to the extraocular muscles of the eye. And the last nerve on this page, before we go into the others, is the facial nerve. That's cranial nerve 7, one of the most important cranial nerves. Again, very large nerve. It pierces through the parotid glands on the side of the head and continues through the rest of the face. This nerve is a mixed nerve, as often large nerves are. It provides 3 separate or even 4 separate sort of modalities here, functions. One is that it provides motor to the face, meaning all the muscles of facial expression movements in the face, like the zygomaticus, like orbicularis oris, orbicularis others, risorius, platysma. All of these muscles of facial expression are supplied by the facial nerve. Also taste buds in the anterior of the tongue for taste sensation, supplied by the facial nerve as well. And lacrimation, production of tears, and salivation, production of saliva through the salivary glands, like the parotid gland that I just mentioned, is also all done by the facial nerve, again, cranial nerve 7. Primarily, when you think of facial nerve, you should be thinking of motor to the face, taste to anterior tongue, production of tears, and production of saliva. Okay. Now, for cranial nerve 8, can you look over to the next page? So cranial nerve 8, called the vestibular cochlear nerve, also called auditory nerve. This long word vestibular cochlear, vestibular referring to balance control in the body, cochlear referring to the mechanism for sensation of hearing. Basically, this is a pure sensory nerve deep inside the brain, kind of connected to the temporal lobe and to the inner ear mechanism. And this is where the hearing and balance sensations are detected and processed, essentially. Okay, so again, vestibular cochlear nerve, one nerve, deals both with hearing and balance information in the body. Okay. The next nerve, cranial nerve 9, this is the glossopharyngeal nerve. Glossopharyngeal refers to the tongue and the pharynx. Glossa is tongue, pharyngeal obviously is the pharynx, right at the back of the throat area. Again, this is a fairly large nerve with multiple functions. It's a mixed nerve. Primarily, the best way to think about it is to essentially remember that it provides a taste to the posterior of the tongue, right? Remember, anterior of the tongue was the facial nerve, posterior is the glossopharyngeal, and also deals to some extent with swallowing mechanism in the pharynx. Other cranial nerves also help with swallowing. Glossopharyngeal is one of these. Again, there are multiple muscles in the pharynx to help you swallow food and liquids. Glossopharyngeal nerve, cranial nerve 9, is one of these that helps you do that. The next nerve, cranial nerve 10, one of the largest, probably the largest of the cranial nerves, the longest definitely in distance that it covers in the body. That's the vagus nerve. Vagus means wanderer. It kind of wanders throughout the body. This is a mixed nerve. Again, the brief kind of overview of its function is that, again, it provides speech essentially for you. So when you're speaking, when you're moving the vocal cords, things like that, as air is passing through the larynx, the vagus nerve there innervates the important structures that allow you to produce speech. It helps with swallowing, and very importantly also, it provides parasympathetic sensation to the abdominal viscera. We're going to talk about parasympathetic very soon, but essentially multiple different organs of the digestive system are actually innervated by the vagus nerve here. Again, cranial nerve 10, vagus nerve, thinking about speech, swallowing, innervation of the abdominal viscera. And the last two nerves, fairly small nerves, kind of less important, but still we obviously going to talk about them. This is the cranial nerve 11, the accessory nerve. This is a little bit unusual here, as this nerve actually sort of does the job of the spinal nerves, because it's basically a pure motor nerve that innervates two regular muscles in the neck area, and that's the trapezius muscles, that's the triangular big muscle in the back that helps you for extension and movement of the neck, and the sternocleidomastoid muscle that allows you to turn your neck, turn your head right and left and do these kind of movements. This is a large muscle connected to two separate locations in the bony skeleton. Again, trapezius and sternocleidomastoids are innervated by the accessory nerve, that's the cranial nerve 11. And the last cranial nerve 12, is the hypoglossal nerve. Hypo, remember, means below, glossa means tongue, right? This is a nerve that innervates the multiple muscles that allow for the movement of the tongue, right? We move our tongue when we're eating, when we're trying to break down the food, when we're speaking, when we're swallowing, right? Very important muscles here. This is a pure motor nerve, so only movements of the muscles are innervated here, and again, it's providing the motor innervation to our tongue. Now, the rest of the information in this chapter, we're going to focus on brief overview of the autonomic nervous system. This is the set of different nerves throughout the body that deal with involuntary control of organs. Autonomic nervous system is present and connected to essentially every single organ in the body, and the best way to do this is to go over it sort of from the point of view of how do we separate, how do we delineate these areas. So when you're looking at the autonomic nervous system, again, autonomic essentially meaning involuntary control, the best way to separate to say, well, there is sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. They are both involuntary. When you say something is sympathetic and something is parasympathetic, keep in mind they're both part of the autonomic nervous system. Now, even though this is often quite confusing, one way to kind of separate them is to say, well, where do these nerves actually exit out? What kind of neurotransmitters these nerves carry? And what kind of specific examples of effects on the body do they have? So again, for the sympathetic nervous system, this is the thoracolumbar location, meaning the nerves actually exit from the thoracic and lumbar parts of the spinal cord. Again, look in the book at the spinal cord where these locations are. And these nerves primarily carry the neurotransmitters epinephrine, norepinephrine, and acetylcholine. Again, keep in mind epinephrine, norepinephrine, this is basically epinephrine is adrenaline. These are neurotransmitters involved in the fight or flight response. In fact, when you think of sympathetic nervous system, you should be thinking of fight or flight. This is a very important kind of a primitive reaction the body generates in certain stressful situations, certain kind of panic, traumatic kind of situations where the body needs to respond immediately to danger, and there is no time to be dealing with higher level centers in the brain. You have to react immediately, and your sympathetic nervous system does that through the secretion of these neurotransmitters that often actually act like as hormones also in the body. Now, at that moment, when your epinephrine, norepinephrine is being released, your heart rate will be going up, your airways will dilate, your pupils will dilate, right? So you want to see the danger. You want your muscles to get the blood. You want your airways to be open to get the oxygen to your body. What are you not going to be doing at that moment of fight or flight? You're not going to be eating food, right? You're not going to be digesting anything. So digestion arrow down, meaning it's decreasing. You're not digesting at that moment, right? You need to fight the danger. You need to fight the problem, the enemy. You're not going to be just relaxing, sitting there eating a sandwich. You need to be actively doing something, right? So it has to make sense. If you want to learn more about this in terms of what kind of other effects it has on other organs, in the lab manual they have a diagram with all the kind of summary of all of these effects. For the parasympathetic nervous system, essentially we are dealing with the cranial caudal connections. That means the nerves for this system actually originate at the very top and all the way bottom. Caudal means like the tail of the spinal cord. They primarily use acetylcholine as their main messenger and or neurotransmitter, and the effects are essentially the opposite of the sympathetic. So if this was fight or flight for sympathetic, parasympathetic is rest and digest. That's how we kind of think of this, rest and digest, right? You're not fighting any enemies, actually relaxing, kind of maybe getting ready to rest, go to sleep, and your heart rate will be decreased, your pupils are constricting, and what's actually happening to digestion here? Digestion is elevated, right? You are now okay to continue digesting food. You don't need to think about that, but this is happening autonomically, involuntarily, and the body is kind of happy and resting state. Again, parasympathetic, sympathetic, look in the lab manual for this information, review the pictures, see what it looks like, and when you're reviewing the cranial nerves, remember to memorize what the cranial nerves do. Again, you don't have to worry about the exact locations, but remember their basic functions and be able to list them from 1 through 12, all cranial nerves. Again, look at the class notes and find information in the lab manual.